Robert Redford died painfully when his wife revealed his secret. He was the golden boy of Hollywood, the face that defined American cinema for over 6 decades. Robert Redford, actor, director, visionary, a man who seemed to have it all: the charm, the talent, the legacy. But behind that composed public image, behind the brilliant smile and piercing blue eyes, lay deep emotional scars and painful secrets that haunted him throughout his life. Secrets he carried in silence, burdens he bore alone. When his wife finally revealed the truth about his hidden pain after his death, the world was shocked. The revelation that one of Hollywood's most admired figures had suffered so profoundly in silence added a heartbreaking layer to his legacy. This is the story of Robert Redford. Not just the legend, but the man. The tragic secrets he carried, the pain he hid, and the truth that was finally revealed. Robert Redford was born Charles Robert Redford Jr. on August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica, California. He grew up in a modest household during the Great Depression. His father, Charles Redford Sr., was a milkman who later worked as an accountant, while his mother, Martha Hart Redford, encouraged young Robert's creativity and imagination. From an early age, Redford felt both blessed and burdened by a strong sense of ambition. "I wanted to be someone who mattered," he once said, reflecting on his youth. But the pressure he put on himself would soon intertwine with a series of tragedies that would follow him for decades. Redford's youthful rebelliousness and artistic curiosity set him apart. He was drawn to painting and storytelling long before he found his way to the screen. He attended the University of Colorado on a baseball scholarship, but struggled academically, eventually losing his scholarship due to lack of focus and heavy drinking. Seeking new meaning, he traveled through Europe, an experience that profoundly shaped his worldview. Living as a struggling artist in Paris and Florence, he developed an appreciation for culture, architecture, and the power of individual expression. When he returned to the United States, he pursued acting, a decision that would define the rest of his life. He trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, where his natural charisma and thoughtful approach to performance quickly set him apart. Hollywood soon came calling. His breakout role came in Inside Daisy Clover in 1965, but it was his performance in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969, alongside Paul Newman, that made him a global superstar. The film cemented his image as the quintessential American anti-hero and marked the beginning of one of the most iconic partnerships in cinema history. Throughout the 1970s, Redford's career soared. He starred in The Sting in 1973, which reunited him with Newman. The Way We Were, opposite Barbra Streisand. All the President's Men in 1976, where he portrayed journalist Bob Woodward. These films not only reflected Redford's growing maturity, but also his increasing interest in stories that carried political and emotional resonance. But behind every smile he gave on camera, there lingered a grief that never truly faded. One of the deepest wounds of Robert Redford's life came early, and it was a pain he would carry forever. In 1958, Redford married Lola Van Wagenen, a bright and independent-minded woman from Provo, Utah, who shared many of his values. Their marriage was not a Hollywood arrangement, but a partnership born out of genuine affection and shared ideals. The couple eloped quietly, far from the glitz of show business. Together they built a family that would become the emotional center of Redford's life. They had 4 children: Scott, Shauna, David, and Amy. But tragedy struck with devastating force. Scott, their firstborn child, passed away from sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, at just 2.5 months old. Redford rarely spoke about it publicly, but when he did, the pain in his words was unmistakable. "You never get over something like that," he admitted. "You just learn to live with it, but it changes you forever." This devastating loss shaped his outlook on family, fame, and the fragility of life. It was a wound that never healed, a grief that colored everything that came after. Friends who knew him privately would later describe how this loss followed him like a shadow, present in quiet moments, lurking beneath his composed exterior. The death of his infant son became a defining moment, one that taught him about powerlessness, about the limits of control, about the cruel randomness of life. And it was a burden he largely carried in silence. As his career exploded in the 1960s and 1970s, Redford became one of Hollywood's most admired leading men. Yet the fame that brought him global recognition also alienated him from those he loved most. Fame is a mask that can suffocate you, he once confessed. You start losing sight of who you really are. The success he had worked so hard to achieve came with an unbearable loneliness. In addition to his acting, Redford developed a passion for directing and producing. His directorial debut, Ordinary People, in 1980, was a triumph, winning 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. The film's quiet, introspective exploration of family grief and communication revealed Redford's depth as a storyteller. But it also reflected his own inner turmoil. The story of a family torn apart by the death of a child, struggling to communicate, unable to move past their pain. It wasn't just a film. It was deeply personal. His later films, A River Runs Through It, Quiz Show, The Horse Whisperer, further demonstrated his gift for blending beauty, humanity, and moral reflection. Each project seemed to carry pieces of his own philosophy, his own struggles, his own search for meaning. Beyond Hollywood, Redford's influence extended into environmental activism and independent film. In 1981, he founded the Sundance Institute in Utah, named after his famous film character. The Sundance Film Festival became the most important platform for independent filmmakers worldwide. Redford's dedication to nurturing creativity and innovation proved as significant as his acting career. But even this meaningful work couldn't fill the void left by personal loss. Redford's marriage to Lola Van Wagenen also carried its share of strain and sadness. Though the couple shared 4 children and many meaningful years together, the pressures of fame and the aftershocks of their child's death eventually tore them apart. We grew in different directions, Redford reflected quietly in later interviews. Sometimes love isn't enough to keep 2 people together. Their divorce in 1985 was painful, but it was a step Redford felt was necessary to find peace, something that would remain elusive for much of his life. Friends who knew Redford privately described him as a man of immense depth, a perfectionist who demanded the same dedication from himself that he gave to his craft. Yet that same perfectionism often made him his own harshest critic. The perfectionist in him demanded control, but life repeatedly reminded him how little control he truly had. "I always felt like I wasn't enough," he reportedly told a confidant in his later years. The tension between his private pain and public persona became a quiet battle that took a toll on both his health and his spirit. After many years of remaining single and focusing on his work with the Sundance Institute and environmental causes, Redford found lasting companionship with Sabine Sagars, a German-born multimedia artist whose spiritual and creative sensibilities resonated deeply with his own. The two met in the 1990s, drawn together by a shared love for art, nature, and the pursuit of meaningful expression. Zagar's work, often centered on the relationship between humans and the environment, echoed Redford's lifelong dedication to ecological and social themes. Their bond developed gradually, rooted not in the fiery passion of youth, but in mutual respect, shared creativity, and a profound understanding of life's impermanence and beauty. In 2009, after more than a decade together, Robert Redford and Sabine Sagars were married in a private ceremony at the Louis C. Jacob Hotel in Hamburg, Germany. The wedding was intimate, attended by close family and friends. Their life together in Sundance, Utah, amidst the mountains and wilderness that Redford had long cherished, was marked by tranquility and artistic collaboration. Zagars continued her work as an environmental artist, and Redford often spoke of how her creativity and spiritual outlook inspired and grounded him in his later years. For a time, it seemed that Redford had finally found serenity in love, nature, and creativity. As he aged, Redford continued to captivate audiences with roles that reflected wisdom and introspection. His performances in The Natural, Out of Africa, All Is Lost in 2013, and The Old Man and the Gun in 2018 showcased his enduring charisma and subtle mastery of the craft. When he announced his retirement from acting in 2018, his influence remained as strong as ever. His career had spanned over 6 decades, yet his authenticity never wavered. But even in the quiet moments of his later years, the ghosts of his past never truly left him. Behind the peaceful exterior, Redford had long battled deep emotional turmoil and bouts of depression stemming from his personal losses and the pressures of public life. He carried a sadness that no one could see, his wife would later reveal tearfully. He hid it behind his strength, behind his art, behind his silence. On September 16th, 2025, the world awoke to heartbreaking news that marked the end of an era in Hollywood. Robert Redford, the iconic actor, director, and environmentalist, passed away peacefully in his sleep at his home in Sundance, Utah, at the age of 89. The news sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry and beyond as millions of admirers around the world mourned the loss of a man who had come to represent integrity, artistic vision, and timeless charm. Redford's death was confirmed by his family, who shared that he had been surrounded by loved ones in his final days, resting comfortably in the mountain retreat that had long been his sanctuary, the very place that bore his creative legacy. Sundance. News of his death drew tributes from all corners of the world. Actors who had worked with him described him as gracious, disciplined, and wise beyond measure. Directors credited him with reshaping American cinema by giving independent films a legitimate platform. Environmentalists hailed him as a pioneer who used his fame to advocate for the planet long before it became fashionable. His passing, they said, felt like the closing of a golden chapter in the story of American film. But then came the revelation that shocked the world. When Redford's wife spoke publicly after his death, she revealed the painful truth about the burden he had carried for so many years. The secret pain that shaped his life. The depression he battled in silence. The grief that never left him. He carried a sadness that no one could see, she shared through tears. He hid it behind his strength, behind his art, behind his silence. The revelation that one of Hollywood's most admired figures had suffered so profoundly in silence added a heartbreaking layer to his legacy. Fans who had always seen him as a model of poise and control were stunned to learn of the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. Robert Redford's story became not only that of an artist, but of a man burdened by sorrow, guilt, and the weight of unspoken pain. His death marked the end of an era, but it also shed light on the humanity behind the legend. The secret pain that shaped his life ultimately defined his art, giving his performances a quiet intensity that came from real experience. "Pain teaches you what joy really is," Redford once said. "You can't understand one without the other." His words now echo as both a confession and a lesson, a reminder that even the brightest stars carry shadows that the world may never fully see. Robert Redford was more than just a movie star. He was a symbol of grace, integrity, and